I raised up the sawn-off shotgun, pulled both triggers and shot the man directly in the chest. How on earth has the world come to this when a decent young man has got to do this? Well, my name's John, and I'll tell you what's unfolded. So, this is my story. Hello. Well, for the purpose of this video, I'm playing a character called John. Now, John is a young man, early 30s, a fit, strong young man. So, you're going to have to use your imagination and visualise a fit, strong young man other than me. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this story. I thought of it a long time ago, actually. And I started to write it down. I had before PCs this is, I had a computer and a printer. And I started to write it down, but I ran into a big snag. And the problem was, when I got 3 or 4 pages done, I had to read through it to remind myself what I'd already written. So, I reached a point when it took too long to read through what I'd written, so the project had been shelved for many years. However, now we've got this medium to use, I've suddenly realised the other day that we can do it this way. So it's going to be a video story, right? It's going to be like an audio book, but it's going to be a video book. The reason for that is, much as I would like to have a few £1,000,000 budget and some actors and a few hundred extras and enough money to build a town that I can burn down, you know, you get the idea, right? You get the idea. So unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever you like, you're going to have to sit and listen to me telling the story. And I can only say it's a bit like making a film of World War III, but told like someone looking out the window. That's the best I can do. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. By the way, it's all in here. It's all in my head. I've got a few notes jotted down, but that's all, so it's ad lib. So you must excuse me if I repeat myself, or make mistakes, or whatever. You know, it's just simply me telling a story. But I think, well, I hope, that you'll enjoy it regardless. So we'll make a start. In 2019, China was sending rockets up to space, manned rockets, and they landed on an asteroid. And the problem is, when the astronaut went for a space walk, he didn't know, but there was a very serious, a very evil virus that he got attached to his spacesuit, and he brought it back to Earth with him. Well, the problem is, because of budget cuts the decontamination procedure wasn't carried out properly. And this very nasty and evil virus escaped into humanity. We now fast forward about a year, and this virus had spread. It was spread all around the world. It had also mutated, and it was getting worse. So, what happened was, all the countries sort of closed the borders, and, well, some did. It was called lockdown. People were asked to stay in their homes and everything else. And because this virus came from outer space, the problem is, although we've been around for 200,000 years, we've had natural immunity to every virus there is on this planet. However, okay, you get a cold. Yeah, sometimes they're overwhelmed. But we actually have. That's how we're made. But this time, this virus didn't. Now here's a very, very important point. Very important point. Because this is the first time that mankind knows for certain there is life beyond Earth. And that is really the moral of this film. So at first, everybody was trying to flee the cities. Of course, very, very quickly, the roads became gridlocked, with a crash or two, but mainly just gridlocked. Cars running out of fuel. And so, there were the motorways, all the roads, and by the way, this is set in England, Britain, all the roads were gridlocked and ground to a halt. Now, you already know this can happen. So, there were an awful lot of cars left on the road. Now, the drivers, knowing they would be stuck there, because there was still radio stations, there was still news at this point. And so they could hear on the radios that it was gridlocked and what was happening and the big disaster. And so they had to, they abandoned the cars, just left them. Just turned the ignition off, got out, probably shut the door, probably not, and left them. Which, of course, was very good for me. So the first thing I needed was transport. Now, remember, all the roads are gridlocked and unusable. But there was still a lot of what we know as Chelsea tractors. What mumsies take the little darlings to school in. And there was lots of these abandoned in all the roads in Britain. So the first thing I had to do was to get some transport. I could find one of these with fuel in. The keys were in the ignition and they were unlocked. So there was no problem starting them or anything like that. So anyway, by the way, luckily for me, I wasn't at home, which was in a small town, when this happened. I'd actually been visiting a friend in the country, in a remote house. So, that's how, more or less, that's my first bit of luck. How I escaped. You know, very grateful as well, obviously. So anyway, there was plenty of transport, and there was plenty of all-terrain vehicles, as they're called. that with fueling that would take me some distance, you know, so we could travel around. Well, on one of the roads, and this is where fortune played a major part in my survival, I needed to stop and get another vehicle. So I'm travelling along, the fuel gauge is just nearly on empty, and I see another vehicle, similar vehicle. So I stopped and went to it. Well, as I opened the door, I thought I heard a cry for help. So I looked round and there wasn't anybody about. Anyway, I listened for a bit. There was another cry for help. And I went across and I found this nice young woman that had been trapped in a car through no fault of her own because someone had hit it in the side. It's called a T-bone. It had not been a heavy one, but it had trapped her feet. And she couldn't free her feet. She wasn't injured, but she couldn't free her feet. She'd been there a few hours. So, obviously, I opened the door and a few vehicles up, there was a works van. So I went to that and found some tools in it. And I managed to free her. And so, very early on, I had a partner in crime. A nice young female. Now it turned out I could not have got anyone more suitable. Her name was Alexandria, Alex for short, but we will now call her Jane. So, it's me and Jane. What's that, young man? Jane and I'm telling this story. I'm allowed poetic licence. Just sit down and be quiet. Sorry about that. So anyway, me and Jane went back to the vehicle I was using, which had still half a tank of fuel in, and we carried on. And where we were going, I don't know. We had to survive, right? So the first thing you need for survival is food and water. The second thing you need is a place to stay. Now remember, because everybody had fled their homes, there was no shortage of food. There were, it was just easy, right? In the first instance, in fact, in the first 2 months, it was very easy. There was no shortage of food. There was, tin food. Water would have been a problem. But we had another huge stroke of luck that we found a disused house with its own well. And this was a proper well, right? Not a pump on the system one, with a proper water filter and everything. So that was another major stroke of luck, and it's why I'm here to tell you the tale. So anyway, we found this house and we holed up there for a little while. I don't know how long, month, something like that. And we got to know each other quite well. Well, it turned out Jane had grown up on a farm. She wasn't a farmer's daughter, but she lived locally and spent her time on the farm, and the farmer had sort of adopted her and became a friend. He also had paid for her to go to an engineering college, an engineering college. So she had the grounding, the same as me. I mean, I couldn't have wished for anyone better. Plus the fact, there's several things about her. She had lots and lots of common sense. She was very bright. She was a tough cookie because in my past I'd been a banger and stock car driver, and she'd also done some banger racing. So, you know, she was a tough cookie and could drive, and, well, her skills were better than most men. But to add to the pleasure, she was drop dead gorgeous. She really was. So, that's my major stroke of luck, and another reason why I'm here to tell the tale. So me and Jane set off together, and as I said, we found this house and we managed to survive for a while. Now the towns were an absolute no-go. It was just rioting and killing and fires. You just could not go near a town. However, after only a few weeks, most of the people had either succumbed to the virus or had killed each other. So within the space of, I don't know how long it was, I just can't remember. It's a while ago. But probably 6 weeks, most of the world's population had perished. And so what do? Well, this is really where the story starts. Hello, John again. Just in from racing. How did it go? Well, see for yourself.
Yeah, I think he's got his first week.
Well, back to the story. Me and Jane had known each other for a short while now, and we were getting on very well. But we needed reliable transport. In the early months, and well, the first year or so maybe, there were plentiful vehicles with fuel in them. However, these were fast running out. Plus the fact we needed something safe, reliable and safe, because there were still gangs of mainly young men, sometimes women, females, young females. They were up to no good, basically. There were these gangs roaming the land, and often drunk, because there was obviously plenty of beer and spirits to be had at this point, and they were just, well, doing as they liked. And they all had guns, and they were shooting at you on sight, and sometimes shooting each other and just leaving them to injured and die or dead, just leaving them on the ground, you know. It was not a nice time, and it was a very, very dangerous time. Anyway, so what we did, me and Jane spent the next few months, well, probably the first year, finding houses, remote houses, with enough food, and hopefully water. We carried water with us, but water was a constant problem. But the first thing we needed was reliable transport. Now, both coming from an agriculture background, we realised one of the most reliable transport is a track-laying vehicle, but we needed an old one, nothing with modern electronics. In fact, using a modern four-wheel drive, we had a very, very lucky escape. Luck had been with us up to this point, but God, we were lucky this time, because we came across one of these gangs, and luckily they were far enough away and they started shooting at us. So we fled the vehicle, and across a small field was a wood. We entered the wood. Now remember, these were drunken young men that were pretty idle, to be honest. They didn't chase you that far. So we entered the wood, and then we heard that they were coming after us. So we went out the other side of this fairly small wood, and we walked for a long way. In fact, we were looking and looking, and we began to wonder if luck had gone against us, because we were both getting very tired. However, we came across a road and we found another vehicle. At this point, I must say, it was fairly dry, and so we often took two vehicles just in case one broke down. And it could be, you know, most cars could travel at this, so we took two vehicles until we found a suitable one, and then when we found another suitable one, we took that one, so in case we had a problem. So that's how we travelled around in the first, as I say, few months or so. Anyway, we both realised what was required. It was an old pre-electronics track laying vehicle that we could make bulletproof against normal handguns. You wouldn't make them bulletproof against a cannon, obviously, but against normal handguns shouldn't be too much of a problem. So we went in search of a farm, and we found an old crawler with a cab, and I thought, well, that'd be ideal. Well, we both thought that'd be ideal. Anyway, we started it up, managed to start it very easy. All you have to do, you don't need power, you know, on old vehicles. You just need a battery to start them. And off you go. Anyway, this is where luck turned against us. This blooming crawler had been left standing for a long while, with the same fuel in the tank. Now diesel fuel can get something called a diesel bug, which sort of turns it to jelly. It's like it gums everything up, and it's a major job to clear. Well, unfortunately for us, that's what this flipping crawler had in the tank. So it ground to a halt, and we'd picked up one or two tools, so managed to get the fuel pipe off the tank, you know, and the pump, but no, it wasn't. We couldn't fix it there and then. It was quite a major job, so we had to abandon it. And this was, as I say, it was crushing. Anyway, undaunted, well, daunted a bit to be honest, we carried on foot, and we had to travel quite a mile or so to get to a road where we found a car that ran, and we took that. Then we found another 4x4 which should do us, but as soon as we came across another one, we took that as well, so we weren't going to be caught out again. So we carried on, and being both from farming communities, we knew of a farming museum, but it was about 7 miles away, which doesn't sound far if you've got a modern road and a modern car. But when you're crawling along in a mud field, which luckily it wasn't, it hadn't been wet, so ordinary cars would travel on fields, we managed to make it to this museum. and we found that it was still secure. So that's another major bit of luck. So, bringing some tools with us from the farm, you know, the tools we need to cut locks, etc., just in case. And we did need it. Steel saw and one or two other hammers, chisels, all that sort of thing. We got into the building and there was an international drop, which is a track laying vehicle with a 4-into-1 bucket on it, a big strong old vehicle, pre-electronics, with a cab on and a big steel bucket. They're quite strong vehicles, and this we could convert into something that should make us fairly safe transport, because that's what the first requirement was. So in this museum, obviously, there was fuel in tractors, and it was good fuel. So we raided some tanks and found some cans. I think we found one. We found one jerry can, which holds what, 25 litres, 5 gallons, and several plastic gallon tins. It should be enough to last us quite a while anyway. So loaded up with fuel with a decent, if yet unsafe, vehicle. We got this going, cut the door off and drove it out and carried on away, sedately, not very fast. Not very fast. Anyway, we didn't meet any more intruders, thankfully, and we carried on until we found a remote house again with a good workshop. A remote, not a farmhouse this time. It was a remote house, but it had also had a workshop, a fully equipped workshop, and it also had a generator, which was a blessing, a godsend. So we set to work to make this international drop as safe as we could under the circumstances. Now, from our banger racing experience, we knew the most vulnerable part of an engine is its coolant system, the water, the radiator. So we removed the radiator and found a large tank, and we fitted a water tank. Now, run steadily. It may boil the water, but an engine won't come to any harm as long as it doesn't run dry. That's the only thing you've got to do. And if it did actually overheat, which it did on one occasion, we just had to wait quite a long while for it to cool off, because the one thing that can ruin an engine is to overheat them, i.e. run them without water. It will totally destroy them. So we had reliable transport. So we managed to, as I say, we found this farm with a good workshop, and we didn't really have enough plate. We wanted something like in old money 3/16 steel plate, which should be strong enough to stop a normal handgun bullet. And we did find some, but they were too thin. They had some sheets because it had been a fab shop, and but they were too thin. So what we actually did was double them up, and so we had to do twice the work. So what we did, removed the radiator and fitted the water tank, and got these steel sheets, and we drilled lots of small holes in them. As I say, this workshop, it had a generator which worked, and we had fuel. There was cars all over the place. You didn't have to go far for fuel at this point. And, you know, we were undisturbed. We really were undisturbed, even with the noise of the generator. So we worked fairly hard for 2 or 3 days, to be honest. There was plenty of food in the house, and again we were lucky not to be stumbled across, but these gangs roaming the land were quickly getting fewer and fewer, so the chance of being discovered by one became less and less every day, which was obviously a blessing. So we worked on this international drop, and we fitted steel sheets with holes in on the front and on the sides of the engine. We welded them on the sides of the engine. We also made a box and welded it around the fuel tank, and then we cut sheets the shape of windows and drilled small holes in them and removed the windows and welded these sheets in place so we could see out and were fairly safe from being shot at, which did in fact happen a few times, although nothing very serious. So at last we had reliable transport, unless we were very, very unlucky. Thankfully we weren't. So with reliable transport, we continued to look for a more secure place to live. And travelling around, remember what you need, the necessities: clear running water, and fairly remote, without houses, and a house you can make reasonably secure. And after that comes the difficult job of keeping intruders out. But that's to come. That's to come. So initially we found this remote house, and we had transport. Obviously food wouldn't last forever, but we could stock up. It was, you know, you didn't have to be choosy. It was mainly tin food, because of course there wasn't any fresh food. There was still fresh food growing in the fields. So as long as you had some cooking facility, you know, you could get something to eat. Because there was still, well, plenty actually of fresh food and veg in the fields. And obviously this has only got to be a short-term thing. Something else long-term would have to be dealt with later. So that's how we survived for the first few months and the first year or so. And let's hope that it continues, because we worked hard. Now there's one other thing: our health. Thankfully we were both healthy, but if one of us became sick, there was no help. So what was required was knowledge. Well, that was quite easy to solve, because each town, of course, in villages, have a doctor's surgery. And in that doctor's surgery is a laptop. Now, remember, a laptop can be used from a vehicle. You can power it from a vehicle. So that's how we got the information. We picked up 2, maybe 3. And these had all the notes that you needed for normal ailments. If we got something serious, well, we got something serious. That could not be helped. So we had some knowledge. That's the main thing. And we also required knowledge of growing and things, and we did just the same. So we ended up with, I don't know, 5, 6, 10 laptops. But that was over the next year or so. You know, that wasn't immediate. And other than, you know, a bit of a cold once or twice, we luckily, thankfully, stayed healthy. So that's how we survived for the first few months and year or so. So the next instalment, I will tell you how we made the property, we found the property and made it secure. Or as secure as we could do under the circumstances. Hope you're enjoying it. In a bit. Hello, John again. Well, having found the property, we need to make it relatively secure in the short term, as I said in the last episode. So what we did, we erected an electric fence. Now remember that this property had been an old watermill. It had running water, clear water, drinking water, a few outbuildings, a good workshop, and this is the property that we chose. Unlike the last one, which was very good, but this is the property that we chose to make as secure as possible, and for, in the short term, as safe a place as possible to live. So what we did, we went out using the drop, which was slow but reliable and safe, and we managed to find a turbine to put in the stream, in the mill stream. That provided us with power. It was fairly easy to do. It's not as difficult as you think, but it is time consuming. And it took up a couple of weeks before we got established. So we then erected an electric fence, but of course you can easily get over that by just chucking a rubber mat over, so we needed stronger defences. So we found one of these small excavators, and as I say, everything had just been left in the land, everything had just been left. So you didn't have to travel that far to find things. And so we brought this excavator back and we dug a trench around the property, like a moat. Of course, we had to get in and out. And so initially, all we did was to get some planks, some thick planks, and fasten them together. You know, put some planks across and nail them together like an old fashioned wooden gate, if you like, but very strong, that would stand the weight of vehicles, heavy vehicles. And all we did for starters, we used to just push this across the ditch. That's it. And the electric fence and the barbed wire on the outside, because of course to stop people clambering over the electric fence you had to stop them getting to it, so we just got rolls and rolls and rolls of barbed wire, and we made about, I don't know, 6 feet, you know, metre and a half, something like that, of barbed wire rolls around the outside of the fence. Now, as I say, this wouldn't stop a determined army, but it would stop the odd man or the roaming gangs. You know, it would be a deterrent, and that's what we were after. And of course, as a last resort, if anyone did manage to get in, we made sure that we had plenty of guns and ammunition in the house. Plenty. Because every time that we stopped, we would pick up any suitable armament. So we had handguns and ammunition, but mainly 12-bore shotguns and ammunition. Because the thing is, it doesn't matter who you are, but if you're not used to handguns, they are terribly inaccurate. You know, you shoot at someone, I could almost give you a handgun and stand in front of you a few feet away and tell you to shoot me, and there's a good chance you'd miss. You know, so we had to bear that in mind. So we did have quite an arsenal, you know, of guns and ammunition. So life settled down. We found there were a food warehouse about, 7 to 10 miles away. So in our sedate transport, it took about an hour to get there, an hour to get back, but also we needed something to carry everything. And we may have to travel further afield. So what we did, we found a trailer, a lorry trailer, with a container on the back, a steel container. This wasn't a luxury hotel home from home, but we put bedding inside, and we found a diesel heater, and we could lock it from the inside. We made it lockable from the inside, so it was relatively secure, right? The worst thing is, of course, as I say, we made the drop fairly security proof. You know, we always just take the battery off at night, for instance. You know, just make it a bit difficult. So normally they wouldn't bother, and luckily they didn't. So anyway, we could now travel around, but it was slow. It really was. And we had this house, and as I say, with the armaments around it, you know, we made it fairly secure, so we should be okay, unless luck ran against us, for the next year or so. And that's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. There was one incident where a deranged man who had been mental because he'd been on his own for too long. And he did try to get in, but of course he just didn't. You know, he was electrocuted, and that was it. And so, disturbing incident, but that was the world we lived in. But apart from that, we were more or less left in peace. So life continued like this, and it was a bit humdrum, to be honest. It was quite, you know, we just ourselves the company. It was quite hard to take, you know. But luckily, we both got on very well, as I said in the past. We were both very good friends. And we managed. You just had to. There was no choice. So now we come to the next part. After a year or so of living like this, it became fairly obvious that something more permanent was necessary. You know, we could continue for several years like this, but we needed to move on. And luckily, one day, a couple appeared on the outside, and they were in an army wheeled, people carrier, like what do you call them? It was bulletproof, you know. It was a field car, whatever you call them. They had one of those. And he had been in the military. And they weren't that far away. I don't know. Over 10 miles away, because we could travel 10 miles, but a bit further. But this vehicle is, of course, a lot faster. And they knew of this, so it's got 6 wheels, all-wheel drive, you know. And it was bulletproof, it was ready-made. And being like-minded souls, in other words, they were good people, also like ourselves, you know, they had a lot of common sense and they could manage. They were survivors, that's what I'm saying. They were survivors. And so it made sense to team up with them and start exploring a bit further. So they fetched us another one of these vehicles, so we could travel quite a bit further. And they had already established several houses as bases, about 5 to 10 miles apart, just to give us, you know, room for doubt in case anything happened. So we travelled with them, and we found another house the same, but mainly we came across one with more inhabitants, 2 more people, similar to ourselves. And this was a big stroke of luck because he had been a radio operator and he knew about radios. And he had actually set up a UHF radio communication system. And he had plenty of these handheld UHF sets, and he knew, you know, how, as I say, it set up a rather big network, to be honest, of repeaters, so they worked. So we now had communication with the people, and that was a big step, a big step. So we found these people, and again, as I say, they were decent, like-minded people. And we teamed up, although we kept ourselves to ourselves, if you understand. There's a saying, isn't there? 2's company, 3's a crowd. Well, you know, we could get on and they could get on, but could we all get on? That was always a constant nagging doubt. So we agreed in the first instance that we would live a separate life, but we would work as a team, which worked. So life continued like this for a while, and we found others, you know, very similar circumstance to ourselves. They'd all dealt with problems in different ways, but similar to ourselves, we found others. And as I say, we teamed up, but kept ourselves to ourselves, and we could travel further afield. That's the main thing. And remember, I'm only talking about Britain at the moment. So we travelled round together, but as individuals, if you understand that. And we found a few more people doing exactly the same. Exactly the same. Because we're having to think now about the future. And I mean long-term future. You know, because although we were living day to day, and then month to month, and finally year to year, there was a glimmer of hope of a future. So what happened was we travelled around for a year, 18 months, something like that. And we gathered more and more people. And now we had radio contact with others in very similar positions to ourselves. We all agreed, and it was without exception, that otherwise we'd perish, right? We didn't have a choice. It isn't like you can't get on and you've got to argue and that. No, we didn't have a choice. So, a group of individuals got together, and we decided that we needed a more permanent place to stay, which was a group of houses. You know, like a village built of new houses. And of course, there were plenty of these around. Now the only thing is, by the way, fuel would become a problem. But in the last decade or so, electric vehicles have become more and more popular. And of course, in our house at home, we had unlimited electricity. So electric vehicles were the way forward. And we all decided that was what we had to do. And these other people, they'd managed to get power from a large generator. One had found a house next to a wind farm. And of course the wind farm still worked, so he had power from the wind farm, you know. That's what happened. We were all survivors, and we all managed. So life continued like this for a year or two, until we were looking for a more long-term future. Now remember, humanity had been brought to the brink of extinction. But those that survived were actually the brightest and the best. They really were. And so basically, the gene pool had been cleansed. So what happened was, long term, we all decided, we found houses to live about, quite a way apart. And there was all trades, of course. There were lots and lots of trades. And among these trades were, of course, farmers who knew how to grow food. And land was plentiful. It's not like after a nuclear war when there was, everything was destroyed. Good land was plentiful. Vehicles for cultivating the land were plentiful. Seed was plentiful. There was warehouses full of seed. And so the basis of a society was slowly being formed. And so what happened was, in the long term, and this is long term, we all started living peacefully together, although living apart, and all the different trades grew up again, and I'm talking about proper trades now, not the Mickey Mouse trade like car salesmen, the proper tradesmen. They got settled and established. And so basically what happened was, mankind was cleansed and it had a chance for survival. We'd taken it and we went on to become a much smaller but much happier community. And that is throughout the length and breadth of Britain. And the one sad thing We needed, of course, we needed more people. But the one sad thing was, Jane was infertile. But there were enough people, and we had enough of a community now, enough of a safe community, where we could start breeding again. And that's exactly what happened. And because these newborn came from better stock, for want of a better way of putting it, they would grow up to be more intelligent and better human beings than many have been in the past. So that's what happened. And the rest of it, it's not history, it's in the future. So you'll just have to continue living and see for yourself what's going to happen in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years or so. Because I can't tell you, because it's not happened yet. I hope you like this story and you've enjoyed it. It's been fun telling it. And you never know, we may meet. So that's goodbye from me. Goodbye from John and Jane and all the rest of our small community, spread out over a fair distance. And we hope this will survive to give people hope for the future.